have always been a voracious reader. When I was a young child, I would read at recess or rush to finish a test to dive into a book. As I grew into a teenager, I found the world of fanfiction, and suddenly so much writing was at my fingertips. It was easily accessible, it had my favorite characters, and a lot of it was really good. For a long time, I put aside physical books and immersed myself fully in the digital book world. I consumed epic-length works, I read on themes I didn't know could be written about, I transitioned fandoms a few times and got to experience the best works of those new fandoms too. I still read the occasional book, something that really struck my interest, or something that I wanted to reread, yet my focus was not pen on paper, but rather the world wide web of words. That is, until recently, when I rediscovered my love for physical books too. Today, we're going to discuss how some of my favorite books compare to my favorite fanfictions. We're going to cross-analyze major themes, relationship types, word count, you name it, I'll probably be examining it. If you are in the Hermitcraft or Life series fandoms, I think you'll enjoy hearing about my favorite fanfictions, and if you're in the booktube world, I hope you'll enjoy hearing about my favorite books. And if neither of those describe you, perhaps you'll enjoy seeing some analysis and graphs, or just hear someone speak about something they're passionate about. With all that being said, let's get right into it. So fanfiction was my vice. There was always an archive of our own tab open, always a fanfiction at the ready. It was convenient, it was right on my phone that was already with me at all times, and I thought, this is reading, this is worthwhile. And it's true, it is. And I could in some way conceptualize that I probably was missing some really good books that were out there, but I couldn't bring myself to care or engage heavily in the world of physical books again. That is until 2025. Something switched this year for me. I'd like to pretend it was an organic thing, a turning 26 years old thing that spurred the desire to read more physical books, but it wasn't. I had a major health scare and faced one of those crossroads you occasionally get as an adult where you're aware you could change your whole life if you wanted to. I came out of that experience knowing I did want to change some things about my life, and it started with my phone. It turns out one of the things that was preventing me from reading to my full potential again really was that damn phone. I, like many others, was a scroller. I'd scroll Instagram or TikTok or Twitter. I wasn't even reading fanfiction as much anymore, but spending more time scrolling and scrolling. Occasionally, I will engage with the motivational side of YouTube, usually videos about how getting up early changed their life or how they got themselves to stop scrolling or read more books. Obviously, I see the irony of engaging with social media to learn how to stop engaging with social media, but sometimes these videos will sprinkle in a little nugget of truth that can change your life. I wish really badly that I knew which video this idea came from that I'm going to share with you, but the truth is, I'm not sure. I saw something that said, if you scroll on an app like Instagram for 2 hours a day on your phone, you're spending a full month of your year on Instagram. And this literally shook me. I thought to myself, do I want to look back at my life and have a full month or more of every year dedicated to scrolling? And my answer was no. So I made changes. I had an app called ScreenZen installed on my phone already, and this time I didn't tamper with my restrictions. A strict 25 minutes a day on TikTok and Instagram each with 5-minute unlocks at a time. Other social media apps were included in that as well, but I found that once they were more blocked from my time, I didn't find myself going back to them as much. Now when I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram on reflex, I was greeted with a lock screen. I get asked if I want to open the app for 5 minutes. And sometimes I find myself opening the app and realizing I don't even have 5 minutes to engage with social media. Maybe I'm waiting for coffee to be ready or for a meeting to start. The way I engage with social media began to change. I started being more present, having more time off my phone. I'm now down to only 20 minutes a day on each app and will probably drop it down to 15 in the coming months. I kind of ration my social media time now. Scrolling is a reward for getting things done, and I know I can't overindulge. When my time's up, it's up. So now my screen time's down. Where I was previously spending 5 to 8 hours doing next to nothing on my phone, sometimes more, now I'm spending more in the 3 to 4 hour range, sometimes less, keeping in mind I'm still using my phone to text people, check work emails, watch exactly 20 minutes a day of Instagram, and oh yeah, read fanfiction. Well, 2025 has been a weird year for me. Fanfiction is still a part of my life, and I don't think that will change. A fun fact about me is that I've actually been tracking how much fanfiction I've read every single month since 2021. Back when I used to make TikToks, I actually did the math on how much I read in a year using all this data, and people seemed interested. Last year, I actually planned on doing a I tracked my fanfiction for 3 years video. I had scripted out a large portion of it, combined the data, and just didn't make the video. And that's okay. But I'll share some of it with you now. In 2021, I read 14.5 million words at an average of about 40,000 words a day. The average fanfic I read was 26,000 words, with the longest fic I read that year being 268,000 words. In 2022, I read 18.3 million words at an average of around 50,000 words a day. The average fanfic was 16,000 words, with the longest fic I read being 355,000 words. In 2023, I read 12.7 million words at an average of 34,000 a day. The average fic was 14,000 words, with the longest fic being 166,000. I apparently stopped this project in April 24, so I had to go and finish what old Tara started. In 2024, I read 6.3 million words at an average of 17,000 a day. The average fic was 16,000 words, with the longest fic being 201,000 words. And since I'm curious about 2025, even though it isn't over, here are the 2025 numbers so far, from January to the end of September. In 2025, I read 3.5 million words at an average of 13,000 a day. The average fic was 17,000 words, with the longest fic being a whopping 554,000 words. If you want a video on I tracked my fanfiction reading for 5 years, let me know. I'd be happy to share my methods and go more in depth on the data. But the point of this is to share that even as I was consuming a lot of fanfiction, reading a lot of words, it was going down in the amount year by year. Part of it was being in the same fandom for a while. Part of it was the fandom cooling down in some ways, ramping up in ways I didn't engage with. But most of it was me. I wasn't reading the same, I wasn't engaging the same, and I was feeling it. So in early July, after my second surgery of the year and a lot less time on my phone, I had a lot of downtime and I began reading physical books in earnest again. And it just spiraled from there. I was able to read a book a day, a bigger book in 2. I was getting advanced copies of books coming out in the future. I'm spending time at my local library, local bookstores, and I'm loving it. I don't regret my fanfiction kick, and I'm still engaging with it, but I can also acknowledge that there's something special about engaging with fiction based on original premises. Something special about opening a paper page, the specific smell of a book, and as I was finding books I loved and reconnecting with older books I really enjoyed, I couldn't help but wonder, what was so different about these books versus my favorite fanfictions, and what was the same? And that brings us to the thesis of our video. If I compare some of my favorite books and some of my favorite fanfictions, will I find things in common? Things like themes, point of views, queer aspects, or will they be very different? I would not consider myself a genre-specific reader. I'll pick up anything, might even like it, might even love it. But are my favorites specific? How does the word count compare in these books versus my favorite fanfictions? We're going to dive into all of this and more. I've gathered 12 of my favorite books, my 5-star reads. All of these books I've read or reread in the past year since, as I said, I wasn't really reading physical media in the previous years, just a few a year. I've also gathered 12 of my favorite fanfictions, sort of. I have a lot of favorite fanfictions, and there are many from all kinds of fandoms I've been part of over the years, but I wanted to make sure they were read recently by me, and since I've really only engaged in Hermitcraft / life series / Minecraft YouTube fandom since 2021, I decided to constrain it to just those fandoms as well. 2 of the fanfics on this list are actually a collection of fanfics, I'll explain it later, and some of them are series. Fanfiction is very different from books, so you're just going to have to trust me when I say they're comparable. I'm going to take you one by one for each book and then each fanfiction, and then we will do our analysis. For each of these works, I want to put out a blanket statement that there are certain topics that may be triggering to some. I won't be discussing them super in depth here, but if you know that there are things you like to avoid reading, please check out either the trigger warnings for the books or the tags / descriptions for the fanfictions. To preface my list of books, I want to first say that this is not an exhaustive list of books I like. I've read 63 books this year, and there were many books I thought were very good, but did not make this list. If we're talking star ratings, the ones I'm listing are all 5-star books to me. Yes, they may have flaws. Yes, they may not be your cup of tea, but they spoke to me. I read them and I felt something. Sometimes I cried, and that's special. So they get a 5-star, and they got on the list. For both the books and the fanfictions, we're going to go through each work individually. I'll give you a spoiler-free summary, some information about the work, and we'll go over the major themes. Now, I want it to be said that I'm not trying to reduce these books to themes or tropes. In fact, when a book or a fanfiction relies too heavily on one or two popular tropes for marketing or for clicks, I find it can actually suffer for it. These are best done when they're a small piece of the story that comes together to form a bigger picture. But going over the themes and general vibe of them will be important when trying to compare the works to find similarities and differences. Some of these themes will be off my own noggin from my experience reading them, and when possible, I will also consult with the mighty internet to see if there's any big ones I've forgotten or may have missed. As always, I'll be including a source document in the description below, so be sure to check that out if you're interested. For each work, I will also be mentioning word count, and if I can't find the word count, I'll use this handy tool by J.F. Wigand. Word count's a weird thing with books. In fanfiction, you'll often find people sorting for works of specific length, since that's something you could do. With the work being online, the count's calculated and displayed when judging it if you want to read the work. With books, you usually have to look up the thickness and go, yeah, I could do that. It's not so much knowing that a book is 109,000 words, rather how many pages it is and how tiny the text looks. But for the purpose of our comparison, I want to bring it up because it is interesting to discuss. The average novel is allegedly between 70 and 100,000 words, with anything over 40,000 words generally being considered a novel as opposed to a novella. This is, of course, not set in stone. There are no rules. Different genres will also have different typical word counts, with fantasy and sci-fi often being much longer books due to the world building that needs to be included. To give you some context for what a book may look like and its word count, here are some books you may be familiar with and how many words they have. The Hunger Games has 99,000 words. War of the Worlds has 63,000 words. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe has 38,000 words. Moby Dick has 215,000 words. Little Women has 189,000 words. Dune has 181,000 words. And War and Peace has 587,000 words. So there's a wide variety. Generally speaking, if a book is using a standard 12-point Arial font, 500 words is about 1.8 pages. 10,000 words is around 36.5 pages. More pages generally means more words. If we think back to 2022 when I read 18.3 million words, that's comparable to reading The Hunger Games 184 times or reading War and Peace 31 times. Whereas in 2024, with 6.3 million words, I only read the equivalent of 10 War and Peaces, or 63 Hunger Games. In some ways, this actually does make me feel better because even with what I considered a very low reading year, I was still reading a good equivalent amount of books, just not as much as I used to. I will also be discussing the work's point of view, as well as the gender of the character in the point of view. If you're unfamiliar or have forgotten what you learned in literature class, point of view is about who is telling the story. What do they know? How do they experience the world? For a first-person point of view, you will see pronouns like I and we, putting the reader into the narrator's head. This point of view is actually the whole reason I'm including this. I've been very adamantly against reading first-person fanfictions, and before I took up reading again, first person was something I thought I would struggle with reading. But turns out that's not true. Just a fanfiction gripe. We'll get back to this. Second person is when the pronouns of you or your are used. This is an interesting and a rare one. In fanfiction, it's usually used for self-insert fanfiction, wherein the author pens themselves and the reader into their beloved works. That's not really my cup of tea, but surprisingly, one book will make our list with second point of view and one fanfiction. Third person uses the pronouns he, she, they, and it, and comes in two forms. The first is third person limited. This is when the narrative stays focused on one character's thoughts and experiences. We know it's in their head, but told in the third person perspective as opposed to first person. Third person omniscient is the opposite, wherein the narrator reveals information from multiple perspectives. This can also be used when the narrator either has more knowledge about the world or when they are kind of like an omnipresent voice telling us this story. There's also another point of view called fourth person. This is when the narrator uses abstract pronouns like someone or anyone. It's really broad and rarely used and won't come up in the rest of this video. I will not be discussing further grammar things like tenses because, to be quite honest with you, I don't understand them enough to care. As long as they're all done correctly, my brain doesn't really think about them, and I don't really care to challenge that. The final thing I'll note for each work is if there are relationships in the book and what the dynamic is of the relationship, if so. My goal here is to look at how many works I'm enjoying that have no relationships, have queer relationships, have straight relationships. I want to recognize and say that I know how the different media types may influence this. Queer literature in the physical book publishing space is still something that's being expanded on, and the online fanfiction space is largely queer dominated. My goal is to be able to see if there are big differences between the two in my analysis, and my guess is there will be. I'll also be remarking on if there is explicit content within the work, but I won't be saying what in the work makes it explicit. Just because I say, yes, this book has explicit content doesn't mean 50% of the book is smut. Usually it'll mean there's one or more scenes I would decree lean on the realm of sexual or adult content. This could be light fondling, it could be a heavy makeout scene, it could be full-on coitus, kissing, physical affection that's in base 1 or 2, sleeping together in the same bed. None of that will count as explicit, so like everything in the first 2 sections isn't explicit. The other 3 will all be interpreted as explicit content. I'm not going to be specific here. It's not really important. If you care that much, you can look it up. It's either got explicit content or it doesn't. It's important to some people to have their works be smutty. It's important to others for there to be no smut at all. To me, a good work will use a smut scene to illustrate something about our characters' relationships or themselves. It's a part of human life, and sometimes discussing this in a book is essential to the characters. It can demonstrate power dynamics, it can progress a plot, it can reveal a lot about characters. It has its place during certain times. I can already guess now that most of these works don't have sexual content, but there are some that do, so let's find out which has more, fanfic or books. Take your guess now. I considered going over genre, but decided it would be kind of hard to explain for fanfiction since it's not really genre specific. I also considered going over author demographics, such as the author's race and gender, but on the internet, the person writing my fanfiction could be a 15-year-old living in New York City or a 48-year-old living in Iceland. And I have no idea unless the author leaves one of those author notes that tells you something about them. We don't get author sections on AO3, and that's perfectly okay. Being anonymous on the internet's fun, and I'm going to respect the anonymous AO3 authors and not go over these kind of demographics at all. With all that said, let us start by going over some of my favorite books. Our first book is The Giver by Lois Lowry. You may be familiar with the book because at one point or another you were forced to read it for school, or perhaps you saw the movie that Taylor Swift was in. This 1993 novel is around 200 pages, and based on what I could find, it's around 44,000 words. The story is told from a third-person limited point of view, with our point of view character being a 12-year-old boy named Jonas. This is a dystopian story where the society Jonas lives in is carefully structured. Citizens have strict adherence standards and rituals. When they turn 12, they are assigned jobs decided for them by a committee that would be best fit for their skill. Our main character, Jonas, attends his ceremony and is given a special job, the receiver of memory. At this job, he meets the titular character of the Giver, who gives Jonas memories of the past before society was like this. The Giver is a book I've reread probably 5-6 times, maybe more. I have a copy of the whole series called The Giver Quartet, and it is worn, the spine is broken, it is well loved. There's something about the story I just love. Maybe it's because when the story starts, you find yourself thinking, hey, it sure would be nice to live in a society where all your needs, including housing and food, are taken care of for you. So what if you don't get to pick your job? It might be nice to be told what you're good at. But as the book continues on and you realize how that lack of agency is in fact not good, shocker. In the fourth book, we actually meet another character in this society who is assigned the role of birth mother. This girl is told that her future is to produce babies, even though she has no concept of pregnancy, and by 14, she's giving birth to a baby, demonstrating how the society is not all it's cracked up to be. To me, The Giver is a coming-of-age story. It's a realization that the adult world is not as perfect as it may seem. Some of the major themes here are emotions, rituals, freedom, choice, societal structures, memory, coming of age, grief, and love. There are no romantic relationships, which if you've watched the movie might confuse you, but Jonas and Fiona barely talk in the book, okay? There is no explicit content. Our next book is The Golden Boy by Patricia Finn and has not been released as I write this. I was able to get an advance copy before the publication date of March 2026, and I am so glad I did. This book is 320 pages, likely around the 90,000 word count. It really helped me get back into reading. It's capturing and heartfelt. We follow a retired Hollywood producer named Stafford and his wife Agnes. They're currently living in Hawaii, just living that retired rich life, going to tennis, getting brunch. After getting a letter that his childhood best friend's grandchildren have become orphans and Stafford has been named the guardian of them, we see both him and his wife begin to reckon with their past. This story kind of plays with timelines going back to when Stafford and the best friend Bobby were boys. There were some surprising themes like grief, capital punishment, miscarriage of justice, creativity, abuse, death, family, and more. This book is told in third person, both from Agnes and Stafford's point of views. I'm fairly certain it's told in third person limited point of view, but there might be some times when it's a little more abstract. The main relationship is a straight couple and there is no explicit content. Notes on an Execution is a 2022 novel by Danya Kakafka. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. This 306-page book is likely around 80,000 words. It follows the women involved in Ansel Packer's life, a serial killer set to be executed soon. In Ansel's section of the book, we get a second-person point of view right before this execution. This is probably one of the first published books I've read with second person, and I thought it worked so well here. It helped give that detachment you would expect to see a serial killer have. In the other point of view, we see Lavender, Ansel's mother. She is a hard time with it and makes decisions she needs to survive. We also see Hazel, the twin sister of Ansel's life, and how she observes him throughout the years of his relationship with her sister. And our final point of view character is Safi, a homicide detective who has suspected Ansel for years. Each of these three characters tells their story in third person limited point of view. And they all come together to talk about the victims Ansel left behind and the story of his life. This was a compulsive read. I couldn't put the book down. In the last 20 pages, I think I cried about 3 times. The book just kept whacking you with emotions. Some of the major themes here are the nature of violence, nature versus nurture, how upbringing influences you, morality, the justice system, manipulation, abuse, trauma, empathy, forgiveness. There is some straight relationships in this book, including Ansel and his wife, as well as Ansel's mother and father. There is no explicit content. Our next book is Life and Death and Giants, a 2025 book by Ron Window. This 336-page book is likely around 100,000 words, and I read it on a plane going across the country. At one point, there was a reveal, and I literally gasped and threw my hands up in the air, if that tells you anything about how good this book is. This book follows a boy named Gabriel Fisher, whose mother sadly dies giving birth to him. He has an undiagnosed case of gigantism, a condition that affects the growth hormones and causes a person to grow incredibly quickly and much bigger than the average person. By 5 years old, Gabriel's over 5 feet tall, and he ends up getting involved in sports, beginning in baseball. After another tragedy befalls him, he moves in with his Amish grandparents and then is raised in the Amish way. That is until he is 17, when Amish kids are allowed to leave the nest, so to speak, and experience the world, a tradition called Rumspringa. During this time, Gabriel is over 8 feet tall and like 400 pounds, and he's recruited to play for the local football team. This story is told through a lot of perspectives of people involved in Gabriel's life. We get to see his grandmother, Hannah Fisher, the local bar owner, Billy Walton, the football coach, Trey Bethard, and the veterinarian, Thomas Kennedy, who helped deliver Gabriel and became a mentor for him. These point of views all kind of vary. His grandmother, Billy's, and Trey's point of views are in first person, whereas Thomas's is in third person limited. There are a few male/female relationships in the book, but no explicit content. Some of the major themes are religion and faith, tradition, sports, sportsmanship, family, community, change, personal growth, growing up, family secrets. I thought going into this book that this had more of a magical realism element, but no, it is very based in reality. The problems our characters face are very real, and Gabriel's condition is very real in real life. It's just usually treated early. This is an excellent book, kind of tragic, really good read. Our next work is The 10-Year Affair, which is a 2025 novel by Aaron Summers. This 304-page book is likely around 91,000 words. The book follows Cora, who's attending a baby group when she meets Sam. Cora becomes a little obsessed with him, going so far as to consider cheating on her husband with this man. But they're like both super attracted to each other, and they talk it out and end up deciding it would be a bad idea and they should just be friends. But Cora begins to invent like an entire other world in her head, one in which her and Sam do have an affair. And so the book blends reality of no affair with Cora's fantasized affair, and we go through 10 years of her life, seeing how things would play out, both in the world with no affair and the fantasy world of the affair. This has books such as marriage and relationships, family life, parental obligations, romantic versus platonic friendships, cheating, more. This book is told entirely through Cora's point of view in third person limited. There's a straight relationship and explicit content. If We Cannot Go at the Speed of Light is a 2026 English translation of a Korean short story collection, first released in 2019. Written by Kim Cho-yeop and translated by Anton Her, this 192-page book is likely around 57,000 words. This book has 7 unique science fiction stories and honestly is probably the most comparable work to some of the fan fictions we'll be covering. These stories drop you into a world where some kind of futuristic concept is going on, such as selling emotions in bottled form or being able to put your brain in a library of minds after you die. There's also a story about being stuck on an alien planet. There's a lot going on here. All the stories focus on discrimination against women or some other kind of marginalized groups. The stories are told in both first person and third person limited point of view, and all are from female leads. There are some background relationships, even some queer elements, but none are the focus, so I'm going to classify this as a book with no relationships. There's also no explicit content. The major themes vary from story to story, but some include marginalization, space racism, real racism, personal autonomy, questions of humanity, family relationships, heroism, colonization, exploration, and friendship. Every Heart a Doorway is a 2016 novel, the first of 10 in a series. This book is by Seanan McGuire and is only 176 pages, likely around 44,000 words. This book follows our main character, Nancy, a 17-year-old who has just recently returned from an adventure. And not just any adventure, one through a magical doorway. After struggling to adapt to normal life, Nancy's sent to Eleanor West's home for wayward children. This boarding school is disguised as therapy, but it's really a refuge for children who have found these doors and returned back to their home world. Behind each door is a unique world with different rules than normal life. The worlds have a few different categories, such as nonsense or logic, meaning that they either have rules that make no sense, like talking ponies and being able to get wherever you need to go in like an hour, or that they're strictly governed with laws, kind of like our own world where like if you die, you die. Worlds can also be considered wicked or virtuous, meaning the morality of the world can depend too. Nancy begins life at the school and begins to learn about her world, but a lot of drama quickly unfolds and Nancy and some new friends need to figure out what's going on. This is a quickly paced, beautiful book with such an imaginative concept. It was so magical to read. It's written mostly from Nancy's point of view and what I believe is third person omniscient, but it's hard for me to tell because I listened to it on audiobook. It has no relationships and Nancy is actually openly asexual, which I loved. It has no explicit content. Some of the themes are around belonging, love, family, found family, loss, grief, alternate realities, magic, and more. If this sounds interesting to you, I highly recommend checking it out. You can also read just this book. And honestly, I'm on book 4 of the series, and I would not really recommend the sequels yet. If you have more questions about those in the comments, let me know because I'd be happy to discuss them. They just haven't impressed me as much as the first one, but this first one truly is magical. So I recommend checking it out. It's a really quick read. Our next book is called The Sea of Tranquility and is a 2022 novel by Emily St. John Mandel. This 259-page book is likely around 52,000 words and follows a series of characters who are all connected by this one anomaly they experienced in some kind of way. The first quarter or maybe third of the book, I would say, follows these characters, which includes a young British man living in Canada in 1912, a woman in 2020 trying to find an old friend, a writer in 2203 going on a book tour. Our final character is named Gaspari, a man living in 2401, who with his sister gets involved in this place called the Time Institute. The Time Institute wants to find out more about this anomaly all these people experienced, and Gaspari wants to help. At first, this book can be kind of confusing, but when I got to the book tour section, I felt like things were clicking and they just all fell into place. This is a story about time travel and destiny, bureaucracy. It's about love and humanity and grief and death. This book is mostly told in third person, except for Gaspari's point of view, which is in first person, where relationships are not the focus of the book. There are queer relationships discussed throughout, and our 2020 character is queer, so I will give it that. There is no explicit content. Now, I'm not the first person to recommend the 2024 novel Martyr by Kavi Akbar. In fact, I wasn't even the first person to recommend it in my house. My sister really wanted me to read this one, and I'm so glad I did. This 331-page book is around 98,000 words and follows a young Iranian man named Cyrus Shams who's working in the Midwest. He's a poet, and he's obsessed with the idea of martyrs. His life has not been easy, with his family escaping from Iran when he was young and his mother tragically dying in a plane crash. When he hears about an artist doing a performance piece in a New York museum, he decides to go see it and meet this woman who's talking about death and dying. This book is told from multiple point of views, both male and female. It swaps between first and third person. There are queer relationships in here, both male/male and female/female, and some explicit content. There's also some pretty intense themes like addiction, drug use, grief, suicidal thoughts, mental illness, racism, xenophobia, war, terminal illness, toxic relationships, and death. My Husband is a 2021 French novel by Maud Ventura, translated to English by M. Ramadan. This 272-page book is likely around 68,000 words. It follows a sophisticated French woman who seems to have it all: a beautiful house, 2 children, a great career, and most importantly to her, a great husband. She is absolutely obsessed with this man and wants him to just be as obsessed with her. This is one of those cases where instead of having like conversations, she would rather say something as a test to see how he reacts, even though he doesn't have the full picture. The book is told entirely through our female first-person narrator, except for a little bit at the end, but I'm not going to count that. There is a male-female relationship, and there is explicit content. Some of the major themes here are toxic relationships, gaslighting, emotional and domestic abuse, mental illness, infidelity, and societal expectations. Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins is the most fandom book on this list. This 2025 novel is a continuation of the Hunger Games series, this time going back to Haymitch's Games. This book is 387 pages and likely around 115,000 words. I read it in 24 hours. I was absolutely glued to the page. So compulsive. I didn't care much for the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but I thought this book really pushed the envelope and showed how the Hunger Games were so brutal for the 50th edition. This book is becoming a movie, so I'll probably reread it before it comes out, and maybe I'll think it's not quite a 5-star at that point, but the fact that it impacted me so much when I read it got it onto this list. This story is told through Haymitch's first-person account. It has a male-female pairing, but no sexual content. Some of the major themes are propaganda, political manipulation, authoritarianism, oppression, trauma, control, death, brutality, violence, and grief. Our final book is Daughters of Sparta, which is a 2022 novel by Claire Haywood. This 370-page novel is likely around 111,000 words. This is a Greek myth retelling of the infamous Helen of Troy and her sister Clytemnestra. It's a really hard name to say. It follows them in their lives from childhood into adulthood. As princesses of Sparta, they are both expected to marry men and follow a set path, have many children, hopefully lots of sons, and be good wives. This book is so well done and really gave life to these women who are just so often just small parts of the myths they come from. This book is told from the third-person limited point of view of both Helen and Nestra. It has male-female relationships and explicit content. Some of the major themes are abuse, infidelity, underage relationships, war, violence, and sexism. And that is our list of books. We'll come back to our books after going over all of our fanfics. To preface my list of fanfictions, I want to say that this was a much harder list to curate. In my Hermitcraft fanfic analysis video, I did provide some recommendations of fanfictions I thought would be widely enjoyed, but also not too out there in terms of shipping or hard topics. This list is not the same. I'm including shipping, I'm including some themes some people might not be comfortable with because these are my favorites and I don't feel like censoring myself here. In my fanfiction video, I had comments of people asking for more recommendations, for more highlighting of excellent works, And while I still believe that video was best without too many of those, the comments did make me feel more comfortable sharing a broader range of fanfictions I enjoyed, resulting in this video. Now, all these fanfictions are in the Third Life or Hermitcraft fandoms, which is considered a real person fandom. I covered this extensively in my fanfiction video, and I strongly recommend checking out the section on what RPF means in this context from that video, because I can't go fully in depth here. But to give the short answer, none of these fics are true RPF. They are not the content creators themselves kissing and being in a relationship. They are a caricature of the persona they show online, embedded in the made-up scenarios they put themselves in their Minecraft worlds, which are then often highly fictionalized. Imagine you have a dollhouse and the only dolls you have are of people from a show, like 10 K-pop idols, 12 celebrities, or 20 content creators who make Minecraft videos. When you're playing with dolls, sometimes you want to make stories that include romance, because romance and romantic relationships are part of life. So when you have the two dolls kiss, you know it's not really the people the dolls are based off of, and it's pretend, so it doesn't matter. In this case, the dollhouse is fanfiction, and sometimes the characters are in romantic relationships, because in the canon, they only know like 20 people, and their real-life partners don't exist in the same context. I don't support shipping content creators, and if I recommend a fic where Etho and B-dubs kiss, I'm well aware that the real content creators of Etho and B-dubs are real people with families and relationships that do not match up with the content of the fic. This is fanfiction. It is for fans. It is fiction. It is not real. Imagine it like the dollhouse. Archive of Our Own, the site on which I read fanfiction, exists in collaboration with the Organization of Transformative Works to allow people to explore all avenues of creative outlet and provide a safe place for that content to live. That means content you might not agree with, including RPF shipping and graphic content, may live on the site. Please use caution when using AO3 if you're easily bothered by things like this, and please check my video for more information on how to best use the tag system to ensure that content you do not want to see is mostly blocked out. All of these works will be linked in the description down below, but please do not seek them out just to leave hate of any kind. Everyone really behaved themselves with my last fanfiction video, so I'm trusting it will be the case here as well. If you don't like something, don't read it, and don't send anything mean to someone else. With that long preamble out of the way, let's get into my favorite fanfictions. I have found these fanfictions at different times during the last 5 years of reading in this fandom. A lot of these fics I come back to several times a year. They're, in my opinion, really well crafted and they tell intricate stories. Some have themes that expand on the original content from the content creators, such as Minecraft themes like change death mechanics, the ability to respawn or have a set amount of lives. Potions, magic, hybrid characters are all very common in these works as well. Some are in modern settings or magical realism settings. Others take place entirely in the world of fandom, like being set up in Hermitcraft Season 9, for example. Now, fanfiction is often released in what is called episodic releases. That means that over time, more content is released. This can be done within one work, wherein multiple chapters come out every few weeks or months. It can also be over years in some cases. Authors can put their works together in a series, binding them into a group and arranging the works in the correct order they want them read. Our first fanfiction is a series that has been running since 2022 and was last updated in September of 2025. It is called Still the Echoes Give Us Light by Doc of the Dark, Dr. Trekkie. This series combines to over a total of 517,000 words. There are 18 works in the series, ranging from one-shots in the 1 to 4,000 range and multi-chapter novel-length fics in the 30 to 90 length area. Now, remember, I'm aware of the differences between fanfiction and books. This series would maybe compare to a fantasy book series with multiple books, but I think when you put it all together, it more aptly compares to one almost War and Peace length novel. This series begins at the end of Hermitcraft Season 5, right before Season 6 starts. It goes through the first few life series, Third Life, and Last Life, and how the players react to the events of a death game. In this series, the life series are kind of cannibalized by the Watchers, a fictional species of all-seeing beings who can watch different universes and have other powers as well. In this series, we also have fictional species such as Cinders, Enders, Vex, and hybrids. There's also ghosts, talking ender dragons, magic, and so much more. With a series this big, it's hard to fit an explanation of everything without giving spoilers. It's a world all on its own. One of the first series that expanded what it would be like if this life series influenced Hermitcraft more, bringing in all these added dynamics like Watchers. There are no relationships, although I think based on one of the one-shots, Grian/Scar might happen in the future, but for now I'll count this as none. There is no explicit content. Most of the work is in third-person point of view, usually third-person limited from Grian's point of view, but as the series progresses, we also see Mumbo, Pearl, Scar, B-dubs, and more. There is also one part of the series done in second person from Etho's point of view. I'm beginning to regret assigning themes to these because, like, how do I explain all the themes in this work? I would say some of the major ones are grief, manipulation, genocide, fictional racism/speciesism, oppression, magic, non-consensual body modification, trauma, loss, time loops, possession, and more. Our next work is a work inspired by Still the Echoes Give Us Light. It is unique enough in its premise that I decided not to lump it in with that series, but instead put it on its own. This 2022 series by /Magpie has 2 parts and adds up to a total of 30,000 words. Part 1 is called Ghost in the Machine, and Part 2 is called Vapor. Together, the series is called Fallen Pines. Taking place entirely in Season 8, this is a universe where Grian and Pearl never joined Hermitcraft, and Mumbo died some years earlier. Impulse still begins his base in Bodom with Scar, but the areas where Grian, Pearl, and Mumbo's bases would have been are instead haunted. The first story is more about the ghost and the effects of it, whereas the second part is the recovery aspect with Tango. There are no relationships and no sexual content. This story is told from Impulse's third-person limited point of view. It has themes such as grief, unreality, possession, mental illness, including PTSD, depression, and disassociation. There's also themes of family, with Pearl and Grian being siblings, and Impulse and Tango being siblings as well. Now, this is where I start getting a little loosey-goosey with what counts as one fic. This next fic is actually a group of 3 fics, the original fanfiction and then 2 recursive fanfictions based off of that work, directly continuing from the end of it. Recursive fanfiction is basically fanfiction of a fanfiction. This transformative work of the fanfiction is then transformed even further. Technically, Fallen Pine series is also a recursive fanfiction. Usually, recursive fanfiction does not require the author's blessing to write it, and it diverges from whatever canon the author may have conceived of. Our first work is Possession is 9/10 by Sparrow Passing. This 2023 work is 25,000 words and is set in a modern AU with magic. Think Supernatural, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, something like that. There's phones and cars, but also monster species. This story follows Tango, a demon who has the ability to possess people. He doesn't have like a physical body. He needs another body to get through life. In this world, monsters are hunted and stigmatized, and Etho is a monster hunter. He kidnaps Tango to try and find out more about demons and help his friend B-dubs, who he thinks has been possessed. This work is in third-person point of view of Tango and has no relationship pairings or sexual content. The first recursive work is set after the events of this work, and it's called Fragaria x Ananassa. Ananassa? I don't know how you say that. This 2024 work by Codes and Stuffs is in third person, but kind of like third person omniscient. I don't want to spoil anything, but basically it's more about B-dubs and Tango after the events of Possession is 9/10. The work is 5,000 words and again has no explicit content or pairings. The other recursive work is called The Left-Right Game by Short Feather. Again, taking place after Possession. This 11,000 word fic is what happens after Tango leaves from Etho's place. It's Tango's third person point of view as he meets other characters such as Joe, Cleo, and False. This work, too, does not have any pairings or explicit content. All 3 of these works delve into themes of discrimination, in this case against fictional species. There's also themes of abuse, kidnapping, panic attacks, self-worth, and morality. It's not as simple as saying the character's good, this character's bad. There's a lot of nuance that gets revealed as we go through the story. Our next work is affectionately called The Hunger AU in the fandom. This work is called Lost in the Dark, He's Got a Heavy Heart by Definitely Not a Rough Draft. This 58,000 word fic began in 2023 and was last updated in December of 2024. It is actually still being updated and is considered incomplete. However, the author is active on Tumblr and has said they will be continuing it. This is an excellent example of how in-depth fanfics authors will go, with a site being dedicated to cataloging the world building, design, and lore of this work. Like many other fan fictions, this work focuses on Grian being a watcher, a fictional species. In this world, watchers feed on the emotions of players, specifically very strong emotions. Grian has been literally starving for years, subsisting largely off the strong emotions that happen at the Minecraft Championship Games, which is a real competitive event in Minecraft world. It's a Minecraft tournament. And in the fanfic, it's treated as kind of like an Olympics kind of game. Grian also created the Life series kind of out of necessity from starving, which is where things start to go wrong. The Life series is very much so a battle to the death. And in the story, the characters legitimately feel the fear of thinking they will permanently die. So Grian feeds off of that. After finding out what Grian is, the hermits kick him out, and our story begins with Grian running from them, trying to overdose on weakness potions before they find him. Grian is in a pretty bad headspace for most of this work, truly convinced he's not worth saving and has committed atrocities that are unforgivable. This story is told through third person, technically all Grian's limited point of view, although he does have some magic, which allows him to see more than the average person. There's a pairing of Scar and Grian, although 11 chapters in and there's mostly only references to a possible relationship. There is no explicit content. This work is very well loved by the fandom and has many recursive works for the AU. I want to highlight two of my favorites, both done by Odai Gahara. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. The first is a 2023 4,000 word work called Still the Mind Rejecting This New Empty Space. In this work, Scar time travels back to season 7 before Grian makes the Life series and everything kind of goes south. His goal is to convince Grian to come clean to the hermits about his hunger and to resolve things together. This is a third-person point of view of Scar. The work has no pairings, although it could be alluded that Scar and Grian are together, and there's no explicit content. The second recursive work by the same author is Will the Curse Be Reversed If You Say It Backwards? This 2023 fic is 23,000 words. This is an alternate universe where Grian still got kicked off of Hermitcraft, but is now living in this festival world and feeding off the strong energy from that. Before the fic starts, there's some kind of magic tomfoolery, which brings another version of Grian into the world, basically from another universe. So we have this other Grian and Watcher Grian who was kicked off Hermitcraft. Did I mention that these fics can sometimes get very complicated? Watcher Grian is trying to fix other Grian's code, and just like in the original fic of Lost in the Dark, the hermits are searching for Grian to take him back to Hermitcraft. This work is told in other Grian's third-person point of view. Again, no splash pairings and no explicit content. All three of these works have heavy themes of self-loathing, regret, internalized racism or speciesism, misunderstandings, starvation, fictionalized eating disorders, suicide, body horror, trauma, and more. Our next work is a 6-part series started in 2022 and last updated in 2025. This series is called Unreal Reality, and the author is Feathered Mask. It is 138,000 words and very much leans into the sci-fi elements of Minecraft, kind of speculative fiction. In this world, Minecraft servers are part of virtual reality, and the real-life versions of these people spend their life on a spaceship suspended in virtual reality pods. Magic exists in this universe, both in virtual reality and outside of it. There's also hybrids and different species, such as Netherborn and Watchers. The main fic is called Solitude and is 81,000 words. It starts after one of the Life series called Double Life, where Grian and Scar are soulmates, and they come back to Hermitcraft and are still linked, and are also linked to Mumbo since he stole Grian's soul. There's a sequel in this series alongside some smaller fics that flesh out the world more. There are no relationships and no explicit content, and most of the work is told in third person from Grian's point of view. We do also get Pearl, Tango, Jimmy's, and others' point of views. Some of the major themes are bodily autonomy, species discrimination, virtual reality, magic, and anxiety. Our next work is a 2023 Last Life fanfiction called The Princes of Starryholt by Antarctic Techno. This 83,000 word work is a royalty alternate universe, very sequestered from the Life series that it's based off, and even further from the creators who make the content. In this story, Etho is a prince of a fictionalized kingdom called Adria, who has been put into an arranged marriage with the prince of Ostal, B-dubs. Etho moves to Ostal with B-dubs and begins life in a land where he doesn't speak the language well and is kind of ostracized. Technically, he's not nearly as ostracized as he was in Adria because Etho previously had been sick with this illness they call the curse, based off the boogeyman curse, Most people die when they get this, but Etho survived. He's left with trauma and the occasional bloodlust that consumes him, and he's really afraid that one day he's going to turn against his husband, resulting in killing B-dubs and also being killed by the hostile people. Together, the two bond and begin to form like a real relationship, and they discover some political shenanigans and past history and have to solve those. This fic is from Etho's point of view and is told in third person limited. There is a male-male pairing, but no explicit content. Some of the major themes are politics, discrimination, disability, cultural expectations, autonomy, and tradition. Our next work is a 2022 19,000 word work called A Body is an Object by Rough Boy. This fic takes place in season 8 after Pearl and Gem are added to the server. Our point of view character is Grian, whose backstory isn't as simple as it seems. Without giving too much away about the story, Grian isn't the Grian Pearl knows. Grian is a species called a mimic or cuckoo, a creature that lives in the end dimension. These are based off the mimic of Dungeons and Dragons monster, the mimic. In this story, they're like small, largely bodiless creatures that can transform into inanimate shapes. They also have the ability to be gifted entire sapient forms when another sentient creature dies, such as like an Endirian or a player. The Grian we know in this story has one of these gifted bodies and is not the same Grian. This story goes through a lot of themes, exploring past character death, identity, meaning, loss, discrimination, and trauma. There are no relationships and no explicit content, and the story is told in Grian's third-person point of view. The next fic is our newest fic. It's a 2025 fic called Anybody's Silver Lining by Winterjan. This 20,000 word fic is based in Hermitcraft Season 10 and follows B-dubs in third-person point of view. There is an established relationship of Etho and B-dubs, but when we start the story, they're on a break, like pretty broken up. B-dubs is kind of in a turmoil over this and is just trying to make it through the end of the season when Etho from 10 years earlier joins the server in a glitch. This work follows B-dubs and young Etho along with older Etho as they navigate the difficult relationship that they found themselves in and the wrench that time travel has thrown into the mix. This story has no explicit content and a male-male pairing. It deals with themes such as time travel, romance, breakups, complicated feelings, and identity. Our next fic is a 2023 series called Reach Me Out Here by Remrose. Part 1 is called Closer to Another Shore, which is from Scar's point of view, and then part 2 is called Taking My Nature by the Throat and is in Grian's point of view, third person for each. This is a modern with magic world with some similar made-up species / races that we've seen in other works, specifically Vex, Avians, and Watchers. In this world, Grian and Scar are ex-boyfriends. They dated a while ago and broke up, but are still kind of in each other's like peripheries due to distance and like mutual friends. Scar has this big ceremony coming up as a Vex. It's like a rite of passage where he has to complete a series of tasks alongside a partner, preferably like his partner, a husband, a boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, you get it. Together, the partner and the Vex participating will be bound in some kind of magical way to make the competition have more meaning. And if the Vex doesn't have a partner, they'll be assigned someone random. But Scar's like really torn up about this because he can't imagine bearing his soul to some random person. So he calls Grian in a moment of weakness, and Grian agrees to participate in this ceremony with Scar in kind of a fake dating scenario. This work deals with a lot of mental illness, specifically panic attacks and anxiety. It also has a lot of regret, self-esteem issues. Many fics highlight disability or chronic illness when featuring Scar, since that's an aspect of his real-life self he highlights and advocates for, and this fic is no different. Scar's disabilities and struggles are a big part of the story here, and really well done. There's also a theme regarding the Watchers, such as kidnapping, neglect, abuse of power, manipulation, and morally gray or bad actions. And there's also the cute plot of Grian and Scar competing in this little ceremony. There is a male/male relationship and no explicit content. Our next fanfiction is a 2023 work called Starboy. This 138,000 word work is by Marius Penn Mercy, and I have a confession to make about this one. It's a little embarrassing to admit, actually, but this fic turned me into an F1 fan. Honestly, it introduced me to F1, which, if you're unfamiliar with, is a car racing competition officially called Formula One. There's races across the world every year with a championship for both the best car and the best driver. In this work, Scar is a rookie on a Formula One team, and his other driver is Joel. The cars and the brands in this work are not representative of real life. There's no Ferrari, no Mercedes, but instead names based off the life series in Hermitcraft. Some good fanfiction fun, if you will. Knowing more now about what I know about F1, some things are a little inaccurate, but isn't any fiction based off sports? In this work, Scar the rookie becomes friends with Grian, a well-loved racer who's kind of having a tough time. The two become close, and it's kind of a friends to lovers getting together situation with race cars. This work deals with some of the themes such as sportsmanship and competition, unhealthy coping mechanisms, alcoholism, past abuse, including abuse with a partner, self-esteem issues, and more. It is a male/male work, has no explicit content. This story is told in third person through Scar's point of view. Our next work is called How to Be a Human Being by Dr. Let Me Be Brave. This 2022 work is 48,000 words and does have a sequel, but I won't be speaking about that one in here. This fic takes place in season 8 after that pivotal moment where Mumbo steals Grian's soul in order to become human again, a real canon thing that happened in Hermitcraft that we discussed a little earlier. In this fanfiction, after doing this, Mumbo gets more of Grian's soul than he bargained, including some watcher powers. This work is told mostly from Mumbo's point of view, but also from Grian's in third person. There are no relationships and no explicit content. Some of the major themes are trauma, bodily autonomy and lack thereof, mental illness such as anxiety, trauma, panic attacks, magic, impending disasters/apocalypses, and friendship. Our final work is called Dramaturgy by Worm City. This 2023 work is 166,000 words and takes place in Hermitcraft Season 7. In this world, Mumbo won the mayoral race, Grian vanishes from Hermitcraft entirely, and Scar is head of the resistance. After getting an invite to Hermitcraft Season 8 that has never come to fruition, Pearl and Gem band together to figure out what's going on, and they end up joining Season 7 to investigate. There's a lot going on here with Grumbot, Evo, Watcher stuff. Saying it out loud, I'm definitely realizing how this might sound incomprehensible if you're out of the fandom. Basically, things from the past come up. It's kind of a drama mystery fic. This story is told from Pearl's third person point of view, and it has no relationships and no explicit content. It has themes about alternate timelines, mystery, loss, responsibility, and moving on. It's dramatic. It's more akin to like a novel about drama and interpersonal relationships than anything else. Whoa, we made it. Before we get started in the comparison, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or any of these fanfics, or if you want to read them. And if you have any guesses for how the two compare, now is your last chance to let me know. To do this comparison, we're going to break down the stats on some of these things we went over, sorting it into two overarching categories of books and fanfictions. We will talk some math about the averages, medians, highs, and lows when we can. This will give us a good picture of both of them so we could talk about where we see differences and similarities. First off, we have the years. The years of our work I fully expected to be different. Books have existed for a long time, so there's a lot of options there, whereas the Hermitcraft fandom generously has existed since 2012, but as I found in my Hermitcraft fanfiction video, the number of works did not pick up until season 6 at the earliest, which was in 2018. For books, our range is from 1993 to 2026, with the average year being 2020 and the median year being 2023. This seems about right to me for the works I read, since I have been mainly focusing on some newer content. For fanfiction, our range is from 2022 to 2025, a much smaller range. The average is 2022 and the median is 2023. This honestly checks out as well with the amount I read in those years, since I was reading more in 2023, and it makes sense that I would find more excellent fics in that year. It was also a very big year in the fandom, with season 9 running and having huge events such as the King Ren arc, the Rift, the Empire's crossover. Visually, obviously, there's a difference between the two, with books having a much wider diversity of years, but the range of 2022 to 2025 being dominant is true for both books and fanfiction. Now, I really vacillated on how to display word count to you all. Here you'll see a graph of the two, but you'll notice pretty quickly that there's an outlier in the fanfiction category. That giant series really throws off the graph, so I decided to break down each fanfic that had multiple parts in it to the individual word counts. That left us with a lot more data, but it's way easier to compare than with that behemoth in the mix. Here we can see that there are a good chunk of fics in that under 50,000 word area, whereas the majority of books are over 50 but under 100. Fanfics do have the longest works, with one being over 150,000 words. For books, the average word count is 79,000, with the minimum being 44,000 and the maximum being 115,000. The median is 85,000. With the individual works separated from the series, the average for fics is 34,000 words, with the median of 19,000 words. The minimum is 1,498 words, and the maximum is 166,000. Word count really demonstrates a difference between the two mediums because unless we're talking a short story published online, there would not be a published work under 5,000 words. It is a treat to be able to get a satisfying story in such a small chunk, but it makes it hard to compare to books. Still, The Echoes Give Us Light story has 7 individual works in this series with under 10,000 words, but if those weren't included, essential parts of the world building wouldn't be there. And in fanfiction, you can lean in on people reading these, where in books, you know no one except the superfans would read your tiny, tiny novella about a random character. Next up, we have point of view character. Neither fanfic nor books have any non-binary point of view characters, sadly. For books, we had largely female-dominated point of view characters, with only 2 books having male point of view characters, both interestingly dystopians of The Giver and Sunrise on the Reaping. Every other book on the list either had female or male characters or just female. This is very contrary to our fanfics, which are incredibly male-dominated. Only one fic has a point of view female character, and 2 other fics, both series, have male and female point of view characters. That leaves us with 13 works with solely male point of view characters. If you watch my Hermitcraft fanfiction video, I think this won't come as much of a surprise to you. A majority of fics statistically have Korean in them, and Hermitcraft as a whole has a very small cast of female creators. Of the 24 hermits, 4 are female and 20 are male, only 16% of the hermit population being female. Now, out of those 16 fics, 3 having female point of view characters actually matches that percentage pretty closely at 18%. So I suppose you could say that this data point is representative of the fandom itself. Now, each point of view character will be telling their story in their style of point of view. So let's review quickly and remember that first person is using I and me, second person is using you and your, and third person is using he, she, or they. I decided not to care much about third person limited versus omniscient, but instead lumped them into the same category. I also don't think a pie chart is the correct graph to display this data, but I couldn't get anything to look right or make sense otherwise, so this is what you're going to get. If a work had more than one type of point of view, it got counted for both individually, so technically the total of the works is not correct, and thus it shouldn't really be a pie chart and a percentage. But whatever, this isn't a math class, and I'm not getting graded on it. If you're into math and know what I should have done instead, I'm happy to hear it in the comments below. For both fanfic and books, only one work each uses second person. Honestly, it's surprising to me that any made this list because second person is usually something I completely avoid. But in both of these works, it was done in such an interesting way that not only did I enjoy it, I also remembered it very clearly. I think the reason it worked is because neither work, the second person point of view, had it for the whole book. In the fanfiction, it's one small work under novella size, and in the book, it was one of 4 point of view characters. Third person is dominant for both mediums, but in fanfic, I have 0 first person favorites. This doesn't surprise me, and to be quite honest, I don't think it will change. Even with 6 books on my list having first person, I still think it's not my favorite point of view to read. There's something special about third person, something grounding in a way I don't get in first person, even though in theory you're supposed to be more in the head of the character. There's also the added caveat that while fanfiction is fiction, and the works are removed from the creator, as a reader, you still know their creators. The names and ideas for a lot of the basis of the story comes from them. And so it can make it a little weird to read. I feel like I still have a barrier reading somebody writing as being Korean. It doesn't feel right, but maybe that's just my own gripe. I don't know. If you read first person fanfiction, let me know down in the comments below what you enjoy about it and if you ever notice anything that kind of throws you off. And if you're like me and only read in third person, I want to say that reading books in first person does not feel the same at all. I was honestly quite nervous about reading in first person again when I picked up physical books. I thought my brain had just been warped from years of reading in third person. But it comes back to you, and there are works out there that are just as magical in first as third, and sometimes second. When trying to do the graphs for relationships, I ran into the same issue as I did with point of view, since some works have more than one relationship in a work. In this first set of graphs, I tried to aggregate to just one summation of the work. This left books with multi-pairs in its own category. For both Sea of Tranquility and Martyr, there was male-female, male-male, and female pairings all in the same work. If we do it instead where each book can count more than once, the graphs look a little different. Here you can see that predominantly my favorite books do have male-female pairings. This is definitely not from me seeking them out, more that books I find to be interesting topics still have remnants of heteronormativity in them. In the coming months, I want to make more of an active choice to be reading more queer published works because both of these queer pairings came from the same two books. On the other hand, our fanfiction relationships are surprisingly very platonic, with only 5 works having male-male pairs and the rest having no pairings at all. This was not a consequence of me handpicking the fanfictions, since, as I said, I wasn't holding back on fics with shipping in the same way I did for my previous fanfic recommendations. I think there are just a lot of really strong works in the fandom exploring topics other than relationships, and I think a lot of those stood out in my memory as opposed to getting together or relationship-focused fics. And the fics that do have those topics were entirely male/male works, since, as we just discussed, most of the Hermitcast are males. Now, you might have been able to form this one in your mind some, but let's discuss explicit content in my favorite works. I'm not above reading smut. As I said before, I think there's a time and a place for it. It can be done right, it can elevate character relationships, blah, blah, blah. I don't stop reading a book if there's a sex scene, and if a fic is tagged as explicit, I don't get up in arms if that explicit material includes smut. But perhaps very surprising to you all with preconceived notions of what fanfiction is like, not a single one of my favorite fanfictions has explicit content. And of my favorite books, only 4 have explicit content and only a third of books. This is probably one of the more shocking comparisons. I really thought at least a few of these fanfics had some kind of explicit content, but no, most have no relationships and barely kiss when there is one. My favorite fanfics will tend to do the fade to black allusion to explicit content as opposed to a book, where some authors will just drop in explicit descriptions of a normal night with a partner. I honestly wonder if I should have done a comparison for heavy topics such as violence or explicit content, because while many of these works don't necessarily have sex scenes, some of them have very heavy topics, like starvation, gore, murder, fictional cruelty. So as I stated before, be sure to check out the trigger warnings and tags for each work. Just because they're smut-free doesn't mean they're completely safe for work, and that also doesn't mean they're safe for all audiences. So I just think it is very interesting to look at and realize that it might not have explicit content, but it could still be more dark, more mature, and that can be a little harder to conceptualize and put in a graph. So something to think for next time. Now, onto themes. This one was pretty tricky. First off, I decided to categorize each work based off its vibe. Vibe is entirely subjective by me as a way to kind of make genre work for both of these mediums. Let me outline them to you first. So fantasy includes genres such as fantasy, fairies, cryptids, monsters, magic. If there's something that can't quite happen in real life, it gets put in this category. For fanfiction, this also includes anything that takes place in a Minecraft world where things like potion and respawning exist. Modern includes contemporary settings, basically anything that feels very rooted in the modern era. I would say probably mid-1970s, probably 2030, as long as there's nothing too crazy technology-wise for the future, and as long as there's not anything too old in the past. If the work's rooted in the modern era, it would go in this category. And then if there's fantasy elements, it probably would end up in the fantasy category, even if it's kind of a modern fantasy. Future is anything in the future where futuristic elements are a key part of the story. So things like living on the moon, living on a spaceship, time travel, those are all elements that would get you put into the future category. This is kind of like the sci-fi catch-all. Historic is as it sounds. It's a setting that's too long ago to be considered modern, but rooted mainly in historical knowledge in real life. I left some flexibility for fantastical elements and creative liberty because that's kind of just like a classic of the genre, especially when you go way far back. Usually in these works, the time period matters more than the fact that the village doctor may or may not use magic to heal someone, if that makes sense. Like I said, I get to make the rules, so you're just going to have to trust my judgment on this. For some works, like the book Every Hearted Doorway or fanfics like Possession is 9/10, they are truly magical realism worlds. There's a lot of groundedness to the worlds. People have to eat and sleep. But more than that, there are fantasy elements, so they got put in the fantasy category. So let's look at the two mediums. Given my criteria of Minecraft logic being considered fantasy, this totally makes sense for fanfiction. Surprisingly, books are a little more diverse with way more modern works than fanfiction has. There's also more future books, which makes sense because I have really enjoyed some of those works that are considered science fiction. Like I said, I'm not a genre-specific reader, so if I only read like sci-fi, it would probably be way bigger on the sci-fi category, and if I only read fantasy, it would be bigger on fantasy, etc., etc. So seeing this diversity in books is expected, and the fanfic is expected as well. Now for themes, I also tried to make a generalization of tag-like ideas that the book focuses on. In the same way the pie charts probably weren't the right choice for some of the earlier data, I truly had no idea what I was doing with this one. I sorted the ideas and themes into 6 like very descriptive categories. We have sci-fi stuff, relationships, politics, health, feelings, and vibes. And honestly, some of these are a mess. I put violence, female violence, and gendered violence all in different sections. Oh well. But the point is we can kind of look and see how different works compare, and it's color-coded. I also struggled so hard, I couldn't even make a chart for you. So here's kind of what they all look like next to each other. For books, you can see how there's a focus on relationships, so there's way more green, and there's also political themes with more blue. Hopefully with any book I enjoy, you're going to have a lot of diversity. That's kind of optimal. So there's a wide smattering of colors. For fanfiction, it's pretty similar. There's a lot more yellow and purple, but still largely a good diversity. So if I had to draw a conclusion, I'd say my favorite fanfictions tend to be more introspective, dealing with personal issues, often including health and mental health. They lean more towards fantasy elements and political concerns, whereas my favorite books are more relationship-centered with smatterings of political concerns and mental health. And that brings us to the end of my comparisons. This was a very fun video to make, and it will be a nice visual to reference the next time I have that thought of, how does this book compare to my favorite fanfictions? Reading has always been such an outlet for me, and I don't intend to stop reading fanfiction and engaging in fandom anytime soon, but it is nice to also be reading physical books again, and knowing that if there's a lull in my fanfiction reading, there's a good books I can turn to. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I make videos largely about the Minecraft community, but if you enjoyed hearing me talk about books, I'd be happy to do it again in the future. Let me know all your thoughts and feelings down in the comments. Remember to be kind to one another and me. I will be sharing a document in the description below with links to all the books and fanfictions and references for this video. And I just want to remind everyone again to not go harass fanfiction authors. If you don't like fanfiction or something that the author wrote, keep that to yourself or phrase it politely in my comments. And with that, I will say thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!